VikesNow, Dustin Baker. I'm here with Josh Frey, editor of purpleptsd.com. How's it going, homeboy?
It is going good. Ready to talk some Viking Saints.
Yeah, remember last week I said, this is our burden. We got to get on here and dissect midweek the Eagles loss. But it feels great to dissect the win, doesn't it?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
All right, let's do this. Let's do about 7, 8, 9 minutes on the Lions, and then we'll transition to the Saints for the rest of the week. My take on the Lions game, I was there like I am at almost all home games. And I thought they were going to lose about midway through the third quarter and a lot of the fourth quarter. And for me, that was a bellwether test or a litmus test that said, if you lose to the Lions at home, you're probably going to be an 8-9 team again, or 9-8, and then do some stuff where you miss out on the playoffs. However, finding a way to win reestablishes, or tames my panic that I had that, all right, so this 10-7, 11-6 stuff is realistic because you found a way to beat a scrappy Lions team. Do you disagree with those 6 sentences or whatever it was?
No, I think that's pretty accurate. Like you said, I thought this team was going to blow it halfway through the third quarter. Dalvin Cook goes down with that fumble and then the injury. I'm like, oh great, here we go again. They're gonna blow this to the Lions. But yeah, the fact that they were able to come back, I think that's a really good sign moving forward. Like we talked about a little bit last week, this team, they're gonna have to go through some battles early because one, they're introducing a new head coach. They got a new offense. They got a new defense. It's going to take a little bit to warm things up, but once they get this thing going, I think we saw towards the end of that game that that's the team that we can look forward to, like come December.
I think what our problem is twofold, is that in week one in our building versus the most hated foe, they looked pretty damn good. They still didn't look like terrific on defense, but at the end of the day, end of the game, they only allowed 7 points. So our momentum went boom. This Kevin O'Connell hire was majestic. And then they look equally as horrid against the Eagles. So we don't really know what we got. And you saw both in the Lions game. So how long do you think it'll take before we see the most pure form of the O'Connell Vikings? Is this after the bye week thing? Is this kind of, it already is what it is, like ups and downs?
Yeah, I think, well, one, that Miami game absolutely terrifies me. So I
And
think
it
they're going to
didn't,
look.
what, 2 months ago, it didn't.
No, it did. It definitely didn't a couple months ago. I thought that was maybe a trap game. Now this is like, okay, yeah, they might get blown out in Miami this game. But yeah, I think this is a after the bye, they're gonna look pretty much what they're gonna look for the rest of the season. Like, get through this first month and a half, sort of work out the kinks, get another week of extra practice in, and I think they'll be good after the bye.
Okay, yeah, that Miami game, that's a lesson in which a lot of our viewers already know is when you look at a schedule in April, May, or June, and you start checking off wins and losses, there's always going to be teams that turn out to be stinky or turn out to be gangbusters. And Miami's one of the gangbusters. I remember pulling up that Colts game at the end of the season, thinking, "Oh God, we always play like shit against the Colts." And now, of course, they could turn it around and be 10-5 by that time. But right now, they don't look too formidable. So, a lesson learned when a schedule comes out: teams aren't as they appear. Tell me some stuff that stood out to you that may raise eyebrows or people haven't thought of yet about Lions Vikings, whether it was a Vikings player, a Lions player, yada yada.
Well, the biggest thing for me is the fact that Adam Thielen and KJ Osborne were able to carry this offense while Justin Jefferson got shut down again.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's not a matter of Jefferson being bad. Like 3 catches, 14 yards, obviously not ideal. But if he is just going to be the most overqualified decoy in the entire league, and then they let Adam Thielen, KJ Osborne do the work, those guys are good. Those guys are good enough to get it done, especially with Kirk Cousins as their quarterback getting him a ball. So if this is how the offense is going to look for at least against tougher defenses with some of the star cornerbacks, this is fine.
And I'll always point out that since Cousins became a starting quarterback in 2015, this is what he does distributing the ball. He didn't have a Herculean wide receiver in Washington. He had a bunch of dudes, kind of like the Bears, a little bit better than those guys, but all kind of WR2 types. And so that's what he did: ball distribution to all the tight ends, even to running backs, and then Pierre Garcon, Deshaun Jackson. And I'm forgetting one other one. So thankfully, the Vikings employ a quarterback that when teams do try to take Jefferson away, that, Cousins doesn't say, even though he does get razzled at times about stuff, it's usually not getting the ball to other wide receivers.
Yeah, I know we talked about last week, like, is Adam Thielen just not good anymore? But that's gone. That's gone now. He didn't quite get his 2 touchdowns, but at least he got one. So that's a good thing. And then Dalvin Cook too. Like if he is able to come back from that shoulder injury and be the Dalvin Cook that we saw last week, this offense is going to be really good. This offense is going to be great.
All right, let's not forget to talk about that in about 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah.
What your thoughts are on Cook, whether it's for a fantasy standpoint or a Ty Chandler standpoint. But on the Lions, what? So we're going to see them again. They're probably going to find a way to win. But are you convinced now that these Lions are different than the quote the Lions end quote? Are they better? Are they here to stay? Are they only going to improve?
I think, well, this is definitely different from the old Lions because you think about old Lions, even when they were good, it was all about smash mouth, defense first football, or running
Mm-hmm.
the ball with Barry Sanders, all these guys. This is a high flying offense, even with Jared Goff at quarterback. Amon-Ra St. Brown's awesome. DeAndre Swift is awesome. As long as they can stay healthy, I think this
Mm-hmm.
is a completely different Lions team. If the defense can ever get above average at some point, this is going to be a scary team moving forward.
I will have to keep that in mind because the bird's eye view or the long game is that Aaron Rodgers, thankfully, isn't long for this gridiron world. And logic would hopefully suggest that the team that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah building would have their eye on the division the moment Rodgers says, I'm done. And we pray to God that they don't go find a Hall of Fame quarterback for another 15 years. In that realm, it's important to size up the division because whatever the Bears are building looks funky and not in a good way. But then, assuming the Packers just turn into a decent team that maybe goes 9-8 or best 10-7, because they're due for that type of stuff, then it could be Vikings Lions doing this thing, and maybe some of our anti-hatred of the Lions goes away because I've never hated the Lions. I didn't even hate them on Sunday, but we could be looking at the two teams that vie for the North once Rodgers steps away.
Yeah, once they turn into that 10-7, 11-16, they're not so much the lovable losers that they've been the past few years, huh?
Yeah, I was trying to search my memory bank when I think they got good twice with
Yeah.
Stafford, and that when I mean good, they got to the postseason. And but I even then I don't ever remember thinking like because every time I watch the Packers and Bears games, whether against the Vikings or against other teams, like I want them to suffer, and
Mhm.
never I'll turn on whatever Lions game is and I'll cheer for them. If they're playing the Texans, I'll be like, all right, this is kind of cool. Go Lions. And I don't know if I'm an outlier there, but I've never had felt scorn toward the Lions. And that's probably because the Vikings are 80, 40, and 2 against them all time.
Yeah, I don't think you're alone there. I mean, one thing, this is just a really fun young team. Like
Mm-hmm.
the Bears and the Packers have never really been that up and coming young team, at least for the past like 50 years or whatever. So the fact that you're rooting for this Lions team, like I find myself rooting for this Lions team all the time. I've nicknamed them the Cardiac Kitties. So
Yeah. All right. Fair enough. All right. Let's make our pivot. And this will be a VikesNow pivot. We won't talk about week 3 anymore. We're on to the Saints. And Jameis Williams, I think, is a little injured, but it's going to play. I think Alvin Kamara is good to go. Is it Chris Olave or Chris Olave? It's Olave, isn't
it's
it?
Olave.
It is Olave. Okay.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right. So once and for all, Chris Olave, he's trending to be the real deal along with Garrett Wilson with the Jets. Those seem to be through 3 weeks, the two rookie hits, among others that still have time, Drake London. But let's talk about Dalvin Cook. This sounds like the same injury that he suffered towards the end, or I guess against the Niners last year. And then he played through it the rest of the time. Evidently didn't have any procedures to fix it in the offseason, which I haven't quite figured out. I want to know, is this a game where in these days leading up to it, where we're like, oh yeah, he's probably going to play, but then he gets out there and he gets about 5, 6 touches and it turns into the Madison or Chandler show. What is your take?
Well, first off, I'm no doctor, so I'm really bad at diagnosing this sort of thing. But if there's any reason for him to sit this game out, like even if, like you said, get 5, 6 touches, if he's not 100%, I don't think it's worth overexpending him just for this game in London because it might be different if they lost that Lions game and they were going 1-2 into this game, threatening a 1-3 record if they lose, but going into this, this is not a make or break game for me. And I think Ty Chandler and Alexander Madison, Kane and Wongwu, they're all good enough that they can carry this backfield if need be. So yeah, I'm totally fine with him not even playing this game, but like you said, get 5, 6 touches even. Like yeah, I don't think that's an issue.
And then I know you're not a doctor, breaking news to the viewers, but
Yeah.
doesn't it seem like without surgery, which again he didn't have in the spring or summer, like is this just going to be what he plays with throughout the rest of the year, or could it get better? Could it heal?
So I have read a little bit about this, and it seems like it's not a super serious thing at this point, but if he were to do something to get it repaired, it could be like a multiple month ordeal.
Okay.
And so this might be just a thing where he has to play through it in his career, and then after he's done, he gets it fixed and just doesn't do anything for like a year. But yeah, I don't think this is a huge deal right now, but it's definitely something that's going to pop up again, I think.
But it's weird. Both times it's happened against the Niners and now the Lions last weekend. Like he goes down devastatingly, and
Yeah.
it's like, oh well, he's done for the game. But then thereafter, like 48 hours after, it's like, oh, he'll be fine. And it's like, well, then why was he ruled out? Like beyond the shadow of a doubt in the game. I mean, I'm sure there's all great reason for it, but it just seems strange. Like I'm starting to adjust toward the way the Rams ran their operation last year with O'Connell, that this could be more of a committee. Do you think it trends that way, or will Cook be, the version of the bell cow a month from now?
I've been rooting for it to be a committee this entire time. Just preserve Dalvin Cook's health as long as you possibly can. Like this, we talked about this before too, but just his injury history is not good, especially for a guy that's 27 years old now. So the longer you can preserve him, the better. I think
Okay.
this should be a committee all the way.
And it's worth noting, I think this flies under the radar, that Alexander Mattison, in terms of his age, is in his absolute prime right now.
Yep.
And there's no other way around that unless you, I guess, disagree with age 20, 24 or 25?
I think
24?
he's 25 right
Okay.
now. I might
Yeah.
be wrong about that though.
He's right in that spot. If he were an RB1 with some other team or this team, like it's not going to get any better than this. He should be better than he was the past 3 seasons. And then hereafter, or 2024 and beyond, he's not going to be this good. So if there's ever a time to showcase Madison, now would be the time. And he looked great coming in reserve for Cook against the Lions. All right, so Saints. Give me your broad stroke thoughts or whatever you want to tell the world about Vikings Saints.
So Vikings Saints, I predicted Lions Vikings was going to be a shootout. I think this is going to be an ugly slugfest. This is going to be where defenses reign supreme. I don't think there's going to be a ton of scoring in this game. Like I could see first team to 20 points ends up winning this game, that sort of thing. I do think it'll ultimately be the Vikings that win this game, but yeah, it's not going to be a pretty one. Let's just get that out of the way first.
Well, so we have defensive games in our bones from the last 8 years, and I would welcome one of those because that
Yeah.
would indicate that Vikings defense stood up or at least didn't allow all of these chunk yards, because that really gets on my nerves. They've allowed the second most 15 plus yard gains to opponents, only to the Cardinals, who've had 29. I think the Vikings have 28. And thankfully, it's like the exact opposite of last year, where last year, the in the first quarter, some of the second quarter, third quarter, and almost none of the fourth quarter, they were decent, believe it or not, especially when Hunter was playing. And then when a game was on the line, they turned to feces. Now it's the opposite. They're playing like feces in the less meaningful part of the game, but when it's third and goal or a fourth and one, they stand up and they're good. So I guess we'll take it if forced to choose. But I swear to God that there has to be a good defense between all the personnel they have that doesn't just resign to the fact like, oh, well, we're going to allow 28, 15 plus yard plays through 3 games. That's the way we are, but we'll stand up when it matters, baby. There has to be a good defense in there. Do you disagree?
I think this is going to be, like I said, this is a work in progress still. This is going to be a good defense. It might take till after the bye week you get that Miami shellacking out of the way, but after that, I think this is going to be a good defense.
What would it take in the next, my goodness, what is it, 2 weeks? What would Miami have to do for you to give the Vikings a puncher's chance in that game? Because it sounds like you've written that baby off.
I have absolutely written that off. I think the only way that this doesn't end up being that way is if Tua and he comes out that he actually did have a concussion in that last game where he was wobbling all over the field. I
And then
think
you
that's
get
the only
Teddy.
way that I think this is the only way that the Vikings win that game.
All right. Well, then they'd be best served, obviously, to stack 2 wins here in
Yeah.
London and then at home against the Bears, which they better win. It kind of feels like that Lions test I'm talking about. You better beat the Bears at home, even though they have a more successful history of finding ways to beat the Vikings than the Lions ever have. it would be advantageous to go into Miami 4-1, knowing that you're leaving the state with a 4-2 record heading into a bye.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, so let's see. Yeah, let's. I can't believe we almost glossed over this fact as we went down the show. Who are you cheering for in this game?
Oh, we've been through this. I'm cheering for the Vikings in this game. I
Oh, you
have to.
are.
Yeah, I have to. I have to. Yeah.
Well, let's see. Okay, so I don't have a football equivalent. I don't really have a sports equivalent because I love the Twins so much, and then I love LeBron so much. But this is like your 1A, 1B, Vikings Saints, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And so you know the Saints better than your average bear.
I'd say so. Yeah.
Okay. Well, when we were doing the show, I guess it would have been 2 weeks ago, talking about the Eagles, there was not a doubt in you or I's mind that the Eagles were going to win the game. I didn't think they'd get their asses beat like they did, but I looked at that game. I realized, all right, Hurts is going to be good. Their trenches are fantastic. They're going to beat the Vikings. I've thought about this one all week, and I'm like, God, and I think I'm going to lean towards the Vikings winning by 3-6. But what is your confidence meter? Like, will you be stunned if the Saints beat the Vikings, or kind of compare it to how you felt versus the Eagles?
I definitely wouldn't be stunned if the Saints won this game just because if Jameis Winston actually makes a couple throws in the past two games, the Saints could be 3-0 right now.
Wow.
Like
Okay.
this isn't a bad team by any means, but it just comes down to the fact that Jameis isn't healthy right now. He's got 4 broken bones in his back. He's trying to play through. So if I'll put it this way, I'd be more nervous about the Vikings losing if Andy Dalton was the Saints quarterback, just because I think he can be more accurate as a passer right now. If he can hit Chris Olave for a couple deep balls, like that's the one thing I am nervous about for this Vikings defense. If Chris Olave can break free, he's got great speed. He's a great route runner. The Vikings DB's definitely older. They probably can't keep up with him all the time. So if he breaks free and Jameis hits him, that could cause some trouble for the Vikings. But I'm not super nervous. I like you. I think this is going to be like 3 to 6 point Vikings win.
Okay. And you're keeping it in like the low 20s, or are you going even lower than that?
Yeah, I think if I had to pick a score right now, assuming Jameis is the QB, probably 21-17 Vikings
Okay.
would be my score. Yeah.
And this will, for those that care, these are two London undefeateds. Both teams have been across the pond twice. Altogether, the teams are 4-0. And this will be the first time the Vikings have played the Saints since the Christmas Day shellacking, which was one of the most embarrassing Zimmer defensive performances on record, if not the most embarrassing, merely because they had 7 rushing touchdowns. How
Yeah.
about this one? Since you're equipped, what is your biggest surprise or two from the general NFL landscape through 3 weeks?
I think the biggest for me is just how good the Dolphins have been. Like we've talked about this a bunch already in this episode, so I don't want to do too much on the Dolphins, but
Mm-hmm.
I think just the fact that this offense has come together under Mike McDaniel and clicked this quickly, like beating Buffalo last week, that's a huge win. And just the fact that their defense was able to stand up against that team too, that's the biggest surprise for me, Miami coming out, because I didn't think this was going to be even a playoff team in the AFC.
Yeah, well, it clicked right away with the new head coach, and it's working. My big one, just going through the numbers like I always do, like a weirdo, is that the Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't think that they are a team where you're just like, oh, cool, they'll finish 7-10. They have the third best defense per EPA per play and the seventh best offense through 3 weeks. So the numbers indicate that this thing has been turned around in a summer. And Trevor Lawrence, anytime you watch him, he looks like he is certifiably going to be the real deal. So because that division was weak to begin with, I think you have to adjust or reaffirm your mindset that the Jaguars, like, you shouldn't be stunned if they find a way to go 10-7 or so.
Absolutely, yeah. Like you said, that division is terrible. It's pretty bad. I know the Colts finally got a win over the Chiefs, but there were about 5 or 6 ways they should have lost that game too. So yeah, if Jacksonville comes out of that one, that's big for them and Trevor Lawrence and his progression moving forward. But I don't think that's a huge surprise either. So yeah, they've been very good this year.
They have, and I thought I think I probably in my standings, I think I put them at 6-11 or 7-10 or something. Just
Yeah.
thinking like a normal program, it would take a year to develop, and then even finishing 7-10 would have been a good for them. But no, I think they've already bypassed that.
No, yeah. Even if you look at like Trevor Lawrence, it's scary like how his progression has been over the start of his career compared to like Peyton Manning, where I think they lost like they both lost their first 9 road games, and then their 10th one it was against the same opponent too, and they both won. So yeah, it's very scary how close those two have been.
Yeah, I give this cautionary tale at least once per year on film or on a podcast is that I do not care what anybody thinks. You have to give a quarterback until his third season to start to figure out if okay, is he going to be a franchise guy? So like last year at times Hurts looked like just poop. And you're like, oh, the problem for these guys is that Mahomes and Herbert set the bar so high that when
Hmm.
those guys are Pro Bowlers almost in their first year, then when your guy sucks, you're like, oh, I don't know. So even with somebody as bad as Justin Fields right now, you have to at least see them through year 3. And then after that is where you start to really get a feel like Daniel Jones. He looks
Not
good
good.
sometimes, but then
Not
other
good.
times, you're like the offensive line, or is it him? But yeah, I think there's a real defined cutoff in year 3 or year 4 when you can say, all right, this guy's going to make it, this guy is not. Because, Tua, he was in trade talks last year, or at least manufactured ones about Watson in
Hell,
Miami.
he was in trade talks 2 months ago.
Yeah, that's what I mean. And I think it's
Yeah.
because I think it's the Mahomes and the Herbert rule as of late. Even Josh Allen wasn't very good in his first 2 years. He wasn't accurate. And then one summer he showed up, and then that September he was a top 2 quarterback. So it's I'll continue to preach that if your franchise drafts a dude, Lawrence didn't look like Herbert in year 1. Who cares? As long as they don't look totally moronic or out of place, they still have a chance to blossom. I did the same thing for Drew Lock. I thought, all right, well, maybe he needs to. He appears to be one that's not going to be very good. But if you're going to, hand the keys to a franchise, you got to give them till year 3 before you start to say this is it or this is not.
We'll have to bookmark this for the 2025 Vikings when they have their young quarterback and he's going through the ringer. So
Yeah, well, I
yeah.
gave I gave many nuggets of this speech about Mond, but then that wasn't really truly applicable because he was competing for QB2 and he couldn't
Yeah.
even win that. So all right, sir. That is the week 3 heading into week 4 chat. Perhaps we'll be back on Wednesday talking about a 3-1 Vikings, or we'll be doing the 2-2 thing, talking about what they have to do to stay above water because we know they'll lose to the Dolphins.
Yeah. They will definitely lose to the Dolphins. You can mark that right now.
All right, my man. Thanks for joining. Fried chicken, FREYED_chicken.
Yep.
That's Twitter, and that's where you can find him. And then all of his works are on purpleptsd.com. He also contributes on Vikings territory. That's all we got. And Skull, baby.